The first question I have is, how can government effectively plan for housing assistance and affordable housing supply if they don't know how many newly forming households will be in housing need? So that's the purpose of this research, to quantify that housing need. The first thing I must say is to acknowledge the research team and the excellent work they've done on what's been a really project and a very complex model. Professor Chris Leisman has been involved in the development of housing need models in the UK for over a decade. There's still work to do, but we're now in a position, I think, with housing need modelling that took the UK about 10 years to get to. So we're really quite positive of how things have progressed over time. So firstly, what is housing need? Well, it's a really complex term and it's defined in many different ways. It's often used to quantify the amount of housing necessary to address the specific needs of particular individuals or groups through housing. In the UK, it's used to identify the number of households requiring various types of housing and tenures, providing evidence for housing supply targets. And it's the approach that we're adopting here. We're making normative judgments about what's appropriate in terms of affordability. So we calculate the number of new households that are unable to obtain appropriate housing due to a lack of income. Some of these households will require housing assistance to form, while others will require ongoing housing assistance to support them. So the model predicts newly arising housing need, through quantifying household formation. We don't quantify existing need. If supply can deliver affordable housing over and above the need predicted in the model, it should filter down to those in existing need. So our definition of affordable housing is definition of need is people predicted to form and head a new household and who are unable to afford to purchase or rent market housing given their predicted income. We've had to make judgments on affordability here, and we have adopted 30% as a cost benchmark and a 10% deposit. These are necessary assumptions typical of this type of work, but in the future we will deliver more flexibility in that affordability assumption, because we're aware that 30% is a little bit problematic, and we hopefully be able to vary this figure depending on household income. So the methodology involves who will form a household and who will be able to access market-provided housing, with the difference between those two figures being the residual. So that residual represents the sum of people who try to form an independent household but will need housing assistance and ongoing housing support. So exploring that residual in more detail reveals the level of need and the appropriate housing tenure to meet that need. The model can also deliver a range of alternatives to macro-regional economic scenarios and housing supply scenarios in order to examine how these conditions have an impact on new household formation and their tenure choices. So the model is a lot broader than just housing needs, so it has a number of different potential applications. Just very briefly on the model itself, might be a bit difficult to see from the back there, but the moment is state-based, and the model estimates the need over a 10-year period of time. The model will be further refined to deliver estimates for metro and rest of state, and then down to the local government area level. So this figure on the slide there shows a simplified representation of the model. We've got an overall model of the national economy, which impacts on the labour market status of households, and these are modelled using Hilda data. This feeds into household formation. So the household forming actually make a tenure choice, and the model predicts that tenure choice. Both the housing formation and the tenure choice models are influenced by the local housing market levels, i.e. Rents and prices, because it's easier for a household to form in the cheaper housing markets and more difficult in the more expensive markets given similar income levels. As you can see from the diagram, the interaction of the model delivers that total household formation and also the residual, so those households requiring some sort of housing assistance. Just going on to some results. So this chart here compares household formation under adverse conditions. So adverse conditions are defined as a weak economy and employment conditions, but a strong housing market. So it's a worst case scenario. So it shows the difference between the scenario's forecasted number of households and the baseline forecast that we've adopted. So how many more or less households would form under those economic scenarios. So the impact of negative conditions is actually quite modest, with around 3,000 less households in New South Wales forming on the base scenario, so around about 1%. So negative conditions reduce household formation, but not by a tremendous amount. Conversely, favourable economic conditions have a much bigger impact on household formation. So those positive economic and housing conditions in New South Wales, for example, would lead to an additional 25,000 households forming on the base scenario by 2025. So that's around 8%, something like that. So positive economic conditions lead to much greater rates of household formation. So we get an asymmetrical sort of result. So negative conditions have a bit of a suppressing impact, but favourable conditions have a much more significant impact on household formation, which then feeds through into the level of housing need. Having a look at housing need by state, so the chart shows the number of households in housing need up to the period 2025. It shows the proportion of newly forming households under our definition of household head that would be in need. And the proportion will be a function of income and the affordability of that state's housing market. So take New South Wales as an example, predicted to be an additional 85,500 households requiring some form of housing assistance up to 2025, which is around about 20% of all new households predicted to form by the model. Around about 30,000 of those households would form on income levels that would mean they would be eligible for public housing. And under our current model, the South Australia actually has the lowest increase in housing need under that baseline economic scenario. Commonwealth rent assistance brings a number of complexities into this model when we reduce some of those households below the 30% affordability benchmark, which mean they need to be reduced from the figure. But when we look at the residual, it needs to be sort of unpicked in a lot more detail in order to figure out, well, what households need particular tenures and where Commonwealth rent assistance fits in. So, model use. Where will this model actually be useful? So the model is able to forecast the impact of changing economic conditions and housing market conditions on housing need. So by predicting household formation at various income levels, it's possible to examine the type and quantity of affordable housing necessary to meet this need. So whether it's public housing, community housing, or subsidised rental housing, for example. So such figures allow planning for housing assistance budgets because you're actually able to identify the quantity and type of housing necessary to supply that newly forming need. Housing need assessments also in the UK have been used to underpin local affordable housing targets, and as we move towards, I think, an increasing role for policies such as inclusionary zoning, this sort of evidence can underpin those sort of targets. So as I mentioned at the outset, this is a big leap forward, I think, for robust quantification of housing need, a big development in terms of methodologies. We've got further development still to go, incorporating the new census data, which will make a big difference in terms of the local assessment and help us deliver a more fine-grained analysis. But the ultimate aim is to deliver a model that can be used by various organisations, so federal, local government, community housing providers, to inform housing supply targets and housing assistance budgets. Thank you.